Hello there. Now, espresso tonics are delicious, perhaps one of my favorite drinks. However, they are also a drink that can go very, very wrong very quickly. Perhaps if you have ever made one of these at home, or if you've ever watched a barista make one of these in a busy rush, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, let me show you. The drink itself is 2 ingredients: tonic water and espresso. Simple enough, one might think. However, when we get to the mixing portion, this is where things often go a little bit awry. Now, doing that intentionally felt very wrong because with a little bit of practice and some knowledge, avoiding this sort of bubble over is actually super easy. So allow me to clean up our mess here, and then we're going to talk about the history and how to properly make an espresso tonic so that this doesn't ever have to happen to you again. Okay. The espresso tonic. This is one of those really interesting coffee drinks that feels a little bit more cocktail adjacent than it necessarily does coffee adjacent. It's a really interesting drink in the fact that it is often used as a template. The most traditional form of this is of course going to be tonic water and espresso, but you see all sorts of variations within adding different syrups with different citrus juices. It's really like every shop's got its own thing going on when they have an espresso tonic on the menu. However, we're gonna look at its more traditional form today. So let's talk about where it came from. Now, the espresso tonic is most commonly credited with being originated in Sweden around 2007 at a roastery called Kopi Roasters. This drink, like a lot of coffee drinks that have become pretty common in modern coffee lingo, kind of originated from a barista tossing some ingredients together and finding out that, oh dang, this is actually pretty delicious and pretty refreshing. So the espresso tonic started there and then very, very quickly grew in popularity, made its way over to the US, and you see it pretty much every summer in most cafes that you go to. Now, espresso tonics are made up of 2 primary ingredients. You have your tonic water and then you have your espresso. It's Captain Obvious right here. However, tonic water is kind of interesting, and I do want to note that it does differ from things like club soda or sparkling water. These are not a one-to-one replacement. Tonic water is sparkling water with the addition of sugar and also quinine. Quinine is a medicine that was used for anti-malaria properties back in the day, and it turns out that it is pretty dang bitter. So with the addition of sugar, it turns out the phrase "a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down" ends up being pretty true. They would mix the quinine in with sugar and sparkling water and became a little bit more digestible. Tonic water you see often used in the cocktail space. Of course, a gin and tonic is probably the obvious choice here. However, when paired with espresso, that like slight kind of medicinal bitterness, that sweetness, all of that ends up pairing super nicely. Now, when we talk about our espresso for the espresso tonic, I do like to spend a little bit of time thinking about what coffee I'm using. I think in generally lighter to medium coffees tend to work best. Additionally, I like to think that fruitier, maybe slightly floral coffees work really nicely in espresso tonics. The one thing I do often recommend people stay away from is using super dark coffees, super like chocolatey, like really syrupy coffees. I think that flavor profile in combination with being chilled with the sort of light effervescentness of the tonic water is often pretty unpleasant. So light to medium, keep it fruity, keep it floral, and you'll be off to a really good place. Now, while your espresso and your tonic water are your 2 base ingredients, there are 2 other things that I want to highlight before we get into the technique of building these drinks, and that is that often days espresso tonics nowadays come some sort of citrus accoutrement, if you will. A little garnish, a little zhuzh, a little like something to brighten it up a little bit. There is often a variety of citrus used, and it really depends on your personal preference and also what coffee you're using. Oftentimes, citrus oil will be expressed over the drink, and then that peel will be dropped into the drink, or perhaps you'll find yourself with a nice little citrus slice. The most common citrus fruits that you see used in these drinks are traditionally going to be orange, lemon, and lime. Lime is like really the big one here. However, grapefruit is also a really nice addition. Now, the last ingredient we're going to talk about, and I do factor this as an ingredient, is actually going to be ice. Temperature is a really, really important part of the construction of these drinks, and so having decently sized ice cubes, having a lot of them, is going to be very important here. I don't like when people skimp on ice really in any coffee drinks, but especially here, like foundationally, this drink needs to be cold in order for it to work. Okay, let's make some tonics, as I have 3 different ways I'm going to show you how to make these so you don't have a bubble over. Okay, The first method for assembling an espresso tonic is probably going to be the most common one you will encounter, and also probably the easiest one to do at home. This is going to be the layering or floating method. First thing I'm going to do is pack this cup full of ice. Next, we're going to take a nice high quality tonic water. In this case, I'm using Fever Tree. I tend to use Fever Tree for the most part. For tonics, really tasty, nicely carbonated, works well. Now, the most important part at this stage is to make sure you have left proper headroom for your additional espresso you're adding. I've used about 6 ounces of tonic water here. My espresso is approximately 2 ounces, so just making sure you leave room for 2 ounces plus slightly more. Now, instead of pouring in our espresso directly, I'm going to pour it over the back of a spoon very gently so that it floats over top of our tonic water. Think of this as like a little ramp, a little slide for your espresso. Go slow and steady here. Lift up your spoon as you continue to fill. And there we go. Now, first of all, this looks very pretty. It's very nice from a presentation standpoint. However, we have avoided one major component that is involved in that sort of foaming and bubbling over that you often see with these, and that is agitation. Carbonation, CO2, it is most stable in a very cold form. It's also stable, as most things are, when it is actually still. Now, the introduction of freshly pulled espresso, which has a lot of heat to it, but also has a lot of fats and oils, especially in the crema, creates that sort of release of CO2 that interacts with the espresso to cause that bubble over effect. So, by having a really nice cold base liquid, but also not creating a lot of agitation by dumping our espresso in, we avoid a majority of that reaction. Now, typically you will be served your espresso tonic like this. It'll be nicely layered. Usually you get a little bit of this ombre effect, and then you are sort of left to deal with the rest. You'll usually have a straw, and you'll find if you then stir this again vigorously, even after the two have been combined, you still might be a little bit at risk for a bubble over. So when you get your straw, very gently, to do a little mixing down at the bottom, just continuing to be gentle here until everything is mixed together. Of course, perhaps you want a lime, and there you have it. A nice, safe, non-detonating espresso tonic. And it is pretty dang tasty. However, there are 2 other ways that you can achieve this. Let me show you. Now, the next method we're going to look at is the chilling method. As our first method we looked at addressed kind of the agitation part of the bubble over, this time we're going to be looking at solving the bubble over through temperature. So the beginning is the same. Tonic water, lots of ice. Now, instead of directly pouring our hot, freshly pulled espresso into our cup, instead we are going to flash chill it prior to dropping it in there. Now, you could, of course, wait for your espresso to cool down until it is like a nice either room temperature or cooler temp, but that is going to take quite a while. And while I will preface this that espresso does not die within 30 seconds of pulling, leaving it for a long enough time that it reaches room temperature, you probably will have some slightly negative flavor aspects coming out. However, if you have access to anything that is like a hyper chiller, if you've perhaps prepared a little ice bath for your espresso, you can rapidly chill it that way. This little thing I'm using right here is called a hyper chiller. It is literally just like a double-walled like little ice bath for the espresso. It just rapidly chills it down. You can mock up one of these very, very easily at home, but because we've cooled this down, a majority of that crema has dissipated, meaning that when we pour this over, nothing. It's silence, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's so easy. I think for this one, go in with some orange oil, get that all around there, pop that in, and then we have our straw. Now, while this chilling method does either require some time to chill the espresso or an additional tool to chill the espresso, I think this is by far the most replicable and easy to do once you have that tool, there's nothing that can really go wrong here. It's just easy and delicious. But if you want to do something even more complicated, let's move on to our third method. Now, our last method is going to be called the crema pulling method. I'll be honest, I did not try to think of a name for it prior to this moment, so that's the best I came up with. Please let me know if you have something better. But before we do that, let me make some more tonic water real fast. I'm running low very rapidly. I'm only gonna mention this just so you know it is an option. Tonic water is very easily bought, like pre-made. It's a very, very common mixer. However, you can also make it with tonic syrup. This is also a pretty common thing. This is not sponsored. This is just what I'm using right now. This is Liber & Co.'s tonic syrup. Again, this is like a sugar and quinine syrup that you then just dilute with carbonated water to make a tonic water yourself. And I really thought I had bought enough Fever Tree. This is a little bit embarrassing in my current lack of tonic water. Now, what we're going to do here is kind of interesting. We are functionally going to remove the crema off this freshly pulled shot of espresso, but instead of using a spoon or scraping it, which is of course an option, we're going to syringe out the bottom body of the espresso, if you will. This is perhaps one of the sillier yet most amazing things I've done on this channel. You can really take this right to the bloodstream, can't you? What is left in there is like all crema. That is all CO2 suspended in like coffee oils and fats and all of that stuff that's going to cause a lot of agitation and a lot of reaction with the carbonation already in our tonic water. Now, this is not a method that I have created. I want to give a huge shout out to the first people I ever saw doing this, which was Sterling Coffee Roasters here in Portland, Oregon. They make a ton of espresso tonics. They have a really delicious espresso tonic, and they have gone above and beyond in their creation by allowing their baristas to avoid even the potential of bubble over by syringing out each of their shots. This is so silly and wonderful, and I love it. And then we just pop our nice, hot, yet separated and non-volatile shot right in there. And we'll give it a nice bit of lemon for color as well. Now, is this the most practical thing to do at home? Probably not. Probably one of the other two methods is a little bit better for you, but I do think this is a pretty ingenious and also just fantastic way to make espresso tonics work in the context of a coffee shop where you have to move a lot of drinks very quickly and you do not have time to even risk a bubble over. And just out of like personal love for this shop, if you want to see this method in action behind the counter, Sterling Coffee Roasters, if you're here local to Portland, really, really lovely spot, would highly recommend it. And that, my friends, is a little bit about the espresso tonic, how to make one, and also how to avoid the elusive bubble over. This was a lot of fun. I have a deep love for espresso tonics, and I hope through this, if you haven't tried one before, you try one yourself. They are technical to make, but they are incredibly delicious, and there's a lot of diversity in flavors you can have in them. But with that, I don't even know. I might take all of them and go enjoy these, but in the meantime, my name is Morgan. You can find me here on YouTube once a week, plus shorts. Additionally, you can find me on TikTok or Instagram almost every single day. This was fun. I hope you learned something. I'm gonna enjoy some espresso tonics, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.